The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to episode number 19 of the DataView show. I'm Scott Hayes, your host, a lifetime IBM champion and IBM DB2 Gold Consultant. You can follow me on Twitter at SRHayes. Today we're talking about IBM replication and data delivery in 2020. Our very special guest is none other than the incredibly awesome Frank Fillmore. He's also an IBM Gold Consultant and IBM Champion. You can follow him on Twitter at FFillmoreJR. Frank, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, Scott. How are you doing?
I'm doing super. I'm healthy, and I'm very happy about that. And I'm safe, and the world's a little crazy right now, but it's all good. Are you all safe there in Baltimore, Maryland?
We are. We're doing well. Primarily sheltering in place, and I'd like to extend those best wishes to everybody else on the call today. Stay safe and healthy, whatever you're doing. However your lives are working these days, from at home or the office or whatever.
Right on, right on. So I like our show attendees to get to know our guests a little bit personally. I mean, you're obviously a super professional in the world of IBM, but tell us a little something personal about yourself, a hobby or something like that.
That's a great question. Thank you very much. So I have been trying to do yoga. I've been doing yoga on Zoom. I had done it in person with my yoga instructor, and now doing it remotely, but still enjoying it, and also like to kayak. Like to get out on the water. It's a very pleasant experience. So both of them sort of take down the stress levels and help you chill.
That's great. I didn't picture you as a yoga guy. That's really great news. Good for you on that.
Thank you.
All right. Well,
and this is gentle yoga, by the way. We're not doing the hot yoga or hanging from the ceiling or anything like that. It's low impact.
Can you put your left ankle behind your neck? Do you do stuff like that?
I'm lucky if I can put my left ankle over my right ankle.
So this is the required gibberish. The opinions expressed are that of Scott Hayes and the show guests and do not necessarily reflect that of IBM Corporation or the IBM community. DB2 is a registered trademark of IBM, which also is a registered trademark. We make no claims to any marks belonging to anyone. They're yours. This event is being recorded and replays will be made publicly available. Please mind your manners. Today's show, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get Frank on giving his really awesome presentation on data delivery in 2020. We'll have a few news bits. We'll ask a few polling questions along the way. And at the end, we'll extend thank yous like we always do. So here's Frank. Frank, let's make you the presenter. I see you've joined twice as a panelist. Which one should be the presenter? The one with the live microphone?
Yes, I'm not sure why it's there twice, to tell you the truth. That's an anomaly. It seems to switch back and forth. I'm not sure what GoToWebinar is doing. But just go ahead and make one of them the presenter, and hopefully everybody will see my screen.
Right. Okay, let's gonna go for it here. We're gonna make this one the presenter. It was the one that had the microphone active. Perhaps Kim joined using.
That may be it. She may have. I would have thought she joined via a different link, but if not, you should be seeing my IBM replication data delivery.
Yep. We see it.
Okay.
It looks great.
Ruby.
So
excellent. Thank you very much.
Replication.
I will. And first of all, I'd like to tell everyone in the audience, I have known Scott Hayes as an IBM Gold Consultant for over 20 years. And this is the first time, I believe, that we have co-presented in all the years that you have been doing the DB2 Night show and now the DataView show. and supporting the community and helping the community. So long overdue and very happy to be here.
Well, that's great, Frank. The thing is, you're a very busy guy, and it's hard to get on your calendar.
We'll go with that. Thank you. So our agenda today, we're going to do a brief introduction. We're going to talk about basically an overview of why we replicate data. IBM delivered their first replication technology back in the early 1990s, and we've been replicating data ever since. I read a statistic a while ago that said 40% of enterprise software spend is moving data from one place to the other. And that's not just replication, that also includes things like ETL, but we've been moving data around for a long time and we do it a lot. And then I want to talk about the competitive landscape. This is obviously oriented towards IBM data repositories and IBM solutions for moving that data around and between repositories, but we're going to talk about some other products. We're going to talk about what IBM offers today in terms of packages of software, and then the components of those packages. We're going to talk about sources and targets, the places the data comes from and the places that they go to, with a special emphasis on IBM classic mainframe data, DB2 for ZOS, IMS, and VCM. That's not all we're going to talk about, but that's going to be a focus. We'll also talk about where the data goes to, including data that can be natively updated by IBM directly, such as DB2 for LUW. We'll also talk about some federated targets. So what if we want to copy data from DB2Z into Oracle? And we can do that. We'll also talk about message queues, such as IBM's MQ and Kafka. We'll talk about key features and some upcoming enhancements. For whatever reason, IBM seems to have recommitted to their replication stack in 2020. And so there's lots of cool new stuff coming down the pike. So we want to bring you up to speed on that. And then we'll talk about tooling, how you would administer this environment, how you build it, how you manage it, and how you monitor it. And then I'm going to ask my colleague Kim May to join us for a little bit on decision criteria, purchasing, how you actually consume this software from IBM. It's not as simple as you might think, and then some follow-on resources so you can learn more on your own as you proceed on your replication journey. I like interactive presentations. Scott, I know you're monitoring things behind the scenes, so I'm assuming that everybody else is on mute. If somebody posts a question in the chat and you want to call it out to me, what I typically do is go through a few slides and then pause at a reasonable break point, and if you have any questions, then fire them away.
All right, will do. Yes, I will be monitoring the questions, and I'm filling in your other poll questions now.
I understand, and this is, I hope we don't get a lot of questions on the intro. So the Fillmore Group has been around for 33 years. We've been focused on IBM data repositories and integration software. Been an IBM business partner since 1989. We've been delivering IBM authorized education since 1994. So if you want to take a formal class in IBM's Q replication or change data capture, we can help you with that. I've been an IBM Gold Consultant, and I'm not sure if Scott was a Gold Consultant before I was, or vice versa, but it's been a long while for both of us. So going on 20 plus years.
Somewhere.
And then as Scott has mentioned, what's that?
Around 1998 or 99 is when I joined.
Yeah, so I think we might have been in the same intern class for Gold Consultants. I'll ask you offline about the initiation rights. That's how we'll know if we both joined at the same time.
Right.
And then as Scott mentioned, he is a lifetime IBM champion and one of the inaugural champions when IBM started that program in 2009. So happy to collaborate with him there, as well as all the work that Scott does with iDoug and in the community. So great resource. So it does bring us up to our first poll question, and you said that this is teed up and ready to go. So the question is your organization currently using replication in a production environment? Are you copying data today from a system of record, a repository, and then having that data go someplace else? And I say in a production environment. Go ahead, Scott.
I'm asking that question now. The poll is live. And people have commented in the past that they've been unable to respond to the polling questions. That happens sometimes, we've heard, when you are in full screen mode with the GoToWebinar window. So if you make it less than full screen, you might be able to respond to the polls if you have trouble responding to the polls. Okay.
Gotcha.
We've got almost 80% of our audience voted. I usually let polling questions go for 30 seconds or 80%, whichever comes first. And we're going to close the poll and share the results. Frank, today we've got 83% yes, 17% no.
And that's to be expected. Most people are probably doing this today and have been for a while. And then, of course, there's some people might be wanting to begin their journey. They have a new business requirement that would, benefit from replication technology. And I may be hitting you with polls back to back, but I think that this one's already teed up as well, and then we'll take a break from them. The question is, which replication solutions are in use today in your organizations? What are they? What vendor software are you using to do this? And while you're answering that poll, the other thing that I heard, another statistic a while ago regarding ETL processing, including replication, moving data from place to place, is that the market leader for many years has been roll your own. People would write procedures and recs and SAS and all sorts of stuff to go out and get what they need, instead of having a holistic view of, we want to move data from point to point. What's the best way to do that in a consolidated, rational fashion? Everybody goes out and say, we need this data from here over there today, so let's solve that one problem and then move to the next problem and the next problem, but not having a cohesive strategy for doing that. So I'll be curious as to what people are doing, including none of the above.
Can you see the responses, Frank?
I cannot. It says.
I'm sharing the answers with people right now. It's IBM Data Replication 78%, Oracle Golden Gate 4%, QLIC Attunity 7%, Informatica 4%, other 22%.
So the other 22% might be the roll your own that we were considering. So thank you all very much. This sort of helps me orient where the rest of the presentation is going to go. That's enough questions from me to you for a while. I'm going to go ahead and dive in, but thank you for that feedback.
Well, you're welcome, Frank.
So the why of replication, and there are two big categories, big reasons. They're not, there are lots of specific reasons why we replicate data, but two are that we need to have the data in another format, in another place to do something else with it. We have a system of record, which is processing orders or payroll or money transfers on bank accounts. We're actually working with a customer right now that is using Zelle for those transfers. They have Zelle installed using IBM's Financial Transaction Manager, but they want to take that data and they want to put it someplace else to be able to analyze it in near real time. Is there a sporting event going on and people are paying each other off for bets that they've made during the sporting event? We could track that or try to infer that as to maybe during the Super Bowl, something like that's happening. The other big use case for replication is what IBM calls always on information. This is basically disaster recovery and continuous availability. There are lots of statistics about how much money large enterprises lose if their systems are not available, either to their internal customers or to their external customers. So we need to make sure that when we stand up an application that has an SLA of 100% uptime, that we're able to deliver on that. And this just expands on what I've been talking about, the data synchronization and replication as opposed to the high availability and the disaster recovery and the zero downtime. So you can see in terms of data integration software use cases that data replication is, this is a statistic, I think that was originally out in the dark blue in 2019, and then by 2020, by this year, what spend was going to be. The most prevalent use cases for data integration and replication is very near the top, especially in terms of growth and expansion. So how do we replicate? So I believe Sybase was the first company to really do replication at scale in the enterprise, again, back in the early 1990s. And some of the core principles developed then. What people had been doing before that time is that they were writing an application or they were invoking some sort of utility to unload data from where it was, whether it was ISAM or VSAM or DB2Z or flat files or any of a number of other data repositories. They were writing purpose-built applications to do that. So that had two bad effects. Number one, it was code that needed to be maintained. But the other bad effect was you were now interfering with your transaction processing by doing something else with the data while it was live, or being forced to take the data offline so that you could run this process, meaning that your applications were unavailable. So one of the core processes was low impact, and that is primarily log-based capture, meaning that most data repositories, like we've been talking about, whether it's a relational database or a VSAM or an ISAM, logs transactions for recovery. Even VSAM, which is a flat file, in CICS environments need to be able to back out transactions using CICS as the sync point manager. So the idea is that we can use those logs for another purpose. We can read the transactions, and then we can move them someplace else near real time. Finding out that a fraudulent transaction was fraudulent 3 days later when it hits the data warehouse can be enormously expensive versus stopping it in time while it's occurring and saying, and this just occurred to me at a federal government agency that I was working at not too long ago, that if the same ATM is being used to withdraw government benefits over and over again for different accounts within minutes of each other, that may be fraudulent. It may not be that a bunch of people just happen to queue up at the same time at the same ATM to withdraw money, but there may be one person who is drawing fraudulent benefits out of multiple accounts. So we need to find that out. Trusted delivery. We need to make sure it gets there on time, it gets there once and only once when we're moving the data from the repository. And finally, enterprise scale. We need to do this for billions, hundreds of billions, terabytes of data. One of the IBM's customers is large banking institutions in China, and they have billions of accounts, not billions of transactions or records, but billions of accounts that they hold on their books, and they need to move that data around all the time in case of natural disaster or some other reason to ensure continuous operations for institutions that are vital to their economy and their government. So before I hit this polling question, Scott, what I'd like to do is see if any questions have queued up in the time that I've been speaking so far.
No questions as of yet, Frank. You're just totally wowing them.
Crushing it. So are you ready to poll up question number 3?
Yep, we're gonna run that for you right now.
Perfect.
What purpose?
So given those two broad categories, I wanted to ask organizations in which bucket do you fall, one or both, or none?
And we're looking for 80% of our audience to vote, or 30 seconds. Click your mice. Our beautiful, very good looking audience is responding now, Frank. Let's catch a couple more votes. Going once, going twice. closing the poll and sharing the results with our very good-looking audience. Business in real time captured 63% and always on information captured 67%.
Wow. So that's pretty close between the two of them. Obviously, some organizations are doing both. So it's good to hear that, and that sort of jives with their experience. So thank you very much again, audience. So in terms of very good-looking audience, I have to tell you that I've noticed over the past couple, 3 months where we have been Zooming and GoToWebinaring and using other of these facilities, that the number of people who turn on their personal webcam has dropped significantly. People, I believe, are becoming less photogenic as they're at home and not getting their hair cut, or maybe not showering. I don't know, still wearing their PJs.
I'm glad
we have a good look.
I've got a face mask that says COVID hair don't care.
There you go. That's what we need. Man. So in terms of the competitive landscape, I have popped up here the Gartner Magic Quadrant for data integration tools. If you're not familiar with the Gartner Magic Quadrant, they use this. This is a very common tool for aggregating information across 2 axes. One is the ability to execute, which is the vertical axis, and the completeness of vision, which is the bottom axis, and then they break it up into 4 blocks. And in the upper right corner is where you want to focus, because that's the leaders. They have both the greatest ability to execute, to deliver on their solutions, and the most complete vision. They cover the most bases. They do the most stuff in terms of functionality. And again, this is a common aggregation tool that Gartner uses for goodness knows everything that they monitor out there, not just information technology. So in the upper right-hand corner, we see IBM and Informatica leading the pack. They're in the furthest upper right-hand positions. IBM actually does better when the source or target of the replication is IBM's data repositories, and that makes perfect sense, whether it's DB2 or IMS or vSAM. If those are the things that you want to move data around for, then IBM is the place to be. This is Gartner usually charges for these things, but this is a public link that's available on the material. So if you'd like to read this, it goes on for like 65 pages, and they talk about each one of those little dots in detail. But is something that your management may want to know about in terms of whether IBM solutions make sense in your enterprise. So just a couple of quick quotes. IBM customers highlighted their completeness of a data integration suite, and I need to point out this is not just replication, but things including like ETL that falls under the category of data integration. But functionality, pre-built functions, connectors, and overall performance. And performance is going to be key if you're scaling. And then the different delivery styles. So I don't want to read that in detail. The bottom line is this information is available if you want to see more about it. But IBM has a function-rich product. And then finally, IBM has a big market. One of the reasons that they can afford to invest in it is they have a lot of customers, and they have a lot of big customers that depend on this for their core replication needs. And I mentioned the large government agency, large banks, large insurance companies. IBM's core customers rely on this technology to make their businesses run. So what is replication? Again, at a very high level, we have log-based databases and other repositories. We capture that data somehow. We read it from the logs. Now, that's not the only way we get the data. We can get the data other ways than log-based capture, but that's primarily what we're talking about with replication. There is some sort of intermediate GUI interface or scripting language for administration and monitoring. And then we take that data, however it gets from the capture to the apply, and that could be within the same data center, or it could be thousands of miles away. We apply that to something. It could go to an ETL product like DataStage. It could go to a queue like Kafka. It could go to a business intelligence appliance like IBM Sailfish. It could go into a data lake or whatever you want. There is no repository that I have been able to find so far that I can't get data out of or into using IBM's product suite. Some of them may take a little more work than others, but there is no data that is so locked up that we can't get access to it. So in terms of products, we're gonna look at IBM data replication and IBM InfoSphere data replication. And I'm gonna, like I said earlier, I'm gonna defer to my colleague Kim May, who's gonna talk about packaging. But the distinction between those two, because they're very similar, is licensing. There is a way that you can license just, well, let me step back on licensing for just a second. IBM's initial license scheme was always the source repository and the capacity, the processing capacity, and the target repository and the capacity of that repository. So you license the source, you license the target, you move data between them. But where that broke down is that I may have a vast data repository and I only need a little bit of that data. And so if I were just moving a little bit of that data, that could be very expensive because I may be licensing huge repository. So IBM has come up with different licensing schemes, and I want to focus on the technology, not the licensing, but some of the licensing schemes that IBM has includes what I call all you can eat or unlimited targets. So basically, you take the data repository source and license that, and then you can send that data out to as many places as you want, and IBM doesn't care. So hopefully we'll be able to get Kim to join us in a little bit to be able to talk about that. We're going to talk about the ZOS remote capture. We're going to talk about the InfoSphere classic replication from VCM IMS and federation to others, and then we'll talk about the data replication for continuous availability. So IBM's replication components. IBM bundles together 3 different ways to get data from here to there. And there are different use cases for each. And IBM used to sell these as separate products, and they used to have their salespeople go out and compete with each other in the marketplace to convince customers to buy my stuff. And IBM discovered after not too long that that was a bad idea. It was confusing customers and opening the door to competition. So IBM bundled them all together. So whether you get the IDR or IIDR, the idea is I can use any one of these solutions for which I'm entitled and be able to move the data that way. So the high-level differences between them, IBM SQL replication was IBM's original foray. If you remember back this far, there was an IBM product called Data Propagator. That was their SQL replication. And the way that this was done was the data would be extracted from a log, written to a staging table, and then the apply process that I mentioned before would read from the staging table and put it someplace else. The problem with that approach is that I'm landing the data into another database. I'm logging that change, I'm performing IO, and then I'm doing it all again a second time. And so that didn't scale really well. So IBM decided to take SQL replication pretty much as is, take out the staging tables as the method of transport, and drop in IBM MQ, their messaging technology. So this enabled the very high volume, very large scale IBM replication, primarily for disaster recovery and high availability. So near real-time replication, I need to copy it all and make sure my data repository stays in sync. So if a natural disaster should occur or something else bad happen, I have another place where I can run my applications. IBM bought another technology from Data Mirror, and it is known now, that technology, as change data capture. So the difference in this technology, again, a very high level, broad brush description of the difference, is that the transport mechanism is just straight up TCP/IP, and its strength for CDC is heterogeneous replication. I want to copy from one data repository from one vendor on one platform and replicate that data to something completely different for a different use case, a different purpose. So not the high availability, not the disaster recovery, but data analytics. And so that's where change data capture strength is. Now there are exceptions to all these broad-based pronouncements, but that helps you frame how they work and what they do. I mentioned before the sources and targets. In terms of you can see the sources there on the left, and this is aggregated across SQL replication, Q replication, and CDC. But on the right-hand side, you can see something called the CDC replication engine for FlexRep. That's sort of in the middle. Obviously, IBM's own data repositories are both sources and targets, but you can see all the major vendors, SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, Informix, as well as VCM, IMS, and Cloud as the sources, and then the targets. Why I call out the CDC replication engine for FlexRep and JDBC in the middle is that this is a wrapper that goes around a JDBC call. So whatever it is that you want to put data into, whether it's a database or a queue, if it has a JDBC interface, and I would be surprised that there would be some way to write data that isn't supported by JDBC somehow. But if you want to write data to a repository that supports JDBC, then you can use this CDC replication for FlexRep, which supports the statement that I made earlier, in that you can get to just about everything. Wherever you want that data to go, it could be some sort of proprietary thing that you wrote yourselves internally. If it supports JDBC, you can get it there. So this is as of version 11.7 of IIDR. If you have a back level version, all of these may not be supported, but again, pretty broad based.
Hey, Frank.
So, yes, sir.
You might have answered Christoph's question. He asks, is there any overview of licensing IBM replication products? For example, SQL replication between ZOS and LUW for DB2, vice versa. And that might have been on the slide you were just showing, but if you'd like to embellish for Christoph.
In terms of licensing, we're going to cover that at the end of the pitch, and there are some differences. If you wanted to replicate from DB2 to DB2LUW to DB2LUW, you can do that with DB2. SQL Rep is actually bundled in with DB2 for LUW. Everything you need to execute is there, and you have an unlimited license to do that. It used to be, until relatively recently, that was also true of IBM's Q replication. So that if I wanted to use QRep, needed for higher volumes, continuous availability, disaster recovery, I needed to scale it, you could use QRep as well. Within the past year, IBM has backed off of that licensing and are now converting customers who used to use QRep under the entitlement of DB2 for LUW to some sort of licensing regime. This, I believe, is going to be implemented in DB2 for LUW version 11.5. Now back to Chris's specific question, that is, you mentioned DB2 for Z, and DB2 for Z needs to be licensed separately. And there are different ways to do that. I mentioned the all-you-can-eat. You could license the entire platform and then send the data to as many different places as you want. We'll try to cover as much of that as we can, but if we need to take a deeper dive, we can take that offline.
All right, Frank, and let me know when you're ready for a 90-second break.
I'm ready to take that right now before I go into always on information.
Hey, that's great. Then I'll jump in. I thought I would jump.
Okay, good, and I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay, so some good news for everybody. Often people ask if there will be a handout, and we'll make a handout of Frank's presentation available today. It'll be via the GoToWebinar Handouts tool. That'll show up at near the end of the show. We'll also have the PDF in the replay blog, which you can always find those at dataviewshow.com/news. And if you have any questions for Frank, just ask like Christoph did. Upcoming shows, 18th of June, the season 1 grand finale of the DataView show series. We're going to be looking at Watson Internet of Things, Tririga Platform and Workflows. Our presenter's an IBM champion, and he's going to do some live demos. This is a very fascinating area of technology. Would you like more DataView shows in the future? I'm inviting people to email Stuart Littell and tell him you love the DataView show and that you benefit from it and it helps you support IBM products in your organization. Stuart Littell is currently making the case to continue the DataView show into a second season, so that's important. Let Stuart know you love the show. iDoug has gone virtual. Instead of going to a conference in Dallas next week, it's going to be virtual, and it's going to be on July 20th, 21st, and 23rd. Not sure what happened to the 22nd. Maybe they need a day off, but those are your 3 days. You can learn all about this event and sign up at idoug.org. Some URLs you might want to visit. If you haven't joined the IBM community yet, you should check it out. There's lots of great resources and information there. Network with your peers, ask questions, get answers. The new DB2 console is available for download at ibm.biz/db2 console. That's the successor product to IBM DSM. iiug.org, that's all about Informix and what's going on with Informix. Again, there's your idoug.org. And ibm.com/cloud/Watson Studio Auto AI. It's a really cool tool. You should check that out as well. What else do I have for you? I have a polling question for people. How did you learn about today's show? I'd like to see how effective we are at getting the word out. We're asking our good-looking audience. We have a newsletter, we have Twitter, we have LinkedIn, DataView show homepage. That's where all of our groupies hang out, the IBM community. Couple more seconds to render your opinion here. Good-looking audience is voting, going once, going twice, closing the poll, sharing the results. And the newsletter was the most effective means of getting word out for today's show. Thank you for that feedback. Okay, and back to Frank. Frank, are you ready?
I am, and thank you very much for that break. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. I'm going to make you the presenter.
Thank you, sir. And there we go.
Christoph said thank you, by the way, for answering his question.
Excellent. And we do have more to come from my colleague, Kim May, who will be joining us near the end of the presentation to talk a little bit in more detail about licensing and maybe answer more of your questions. So in terms of always-on information, IBM discovered that there was a lot of flexibility that was built in to their replication products that led to additional complexity. What I mean by that, I may want to copy from a table, just columns 1, 5, 7, and 9 for a specific use case within data analytics. And so the tools and the replication products needed to be able to tolerate that. So just a huge amount of customization and tailoring. What happened, however, was for the always-on information use case of continuous availability and disaster recovery, it was pretty simple. I want all that stuff. I want all the columns and all the tables for this database to go over here. So if my primary data center goes down, my secondary data center is all ready. So what IBM is doing now is that they are building continuous availability functionality, high availability functionality into their products so that you don't have to describe each individual table. And you can do this through a console that they are building out right now, a unified console where you manage the entire server. Let's say you're using a data warehouse server like IBM's IIAS. I want to be able to replicate data from my transaction processing system into the IBM integrated analytics system, and I want all the data to go over there. And if I do that, then I want it to be as simple as possible. I just want to throw a couple of switches. I don't want to necessarily deal with all the complexity of MQ message queues and that sort of stuff. So that's what we're seeing on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, the business in real time, I can get the data from wherever the transaction processing system is and then get it to something different for analytic purposes. And I think we're saying a lot of the same things here. Business in real time primarily focuses on CDC and classic CDC, the change data capture, the legacy data mirror products. And then for always on information, things like Q replication, IMS replication, VSAM replication, and what I just referred to as the replication for continuous availability, where it was skinny down, where you don't have to make a lot of choices and you don't have to do a lot of tinkering in order to get it to happen. So key features. Can we jump into poll number 4 now, Scott? Since we're getting ready to talk about things that are specific to IBM Z Systems, depending on the degree of interest on the part of the audience, we'll go slower or faster through this. So that's another polling question with 3 different answers: DB2 for ZOS, IMS, and VSAM.
The poll is running.
Cool.
And our super good-looking audience is responding. Tell you what, we got some very smart people on today's call. They read, they respond, maybe they're highly caffeinated. I should ask the question if people are working at home today or in an office today. That would be an interesting question to ask. Maybe I'll add that question. That could be fun. We'll ask that one at the end. Okay, we're gonna close the poll and share the results. DB2 for Z, 68%, VSAM 8%, IMS, nobody, 0.
Nobody. Gotcha. Okay. So we will focus primarily on DB2Z with a little bit of VSAM thrown in. Thank you, Scott. So one of the things that had been a challenge with replicating DB2 for ZOS data is that the capture component ran as a started task on System Z and consumed System Z general purpose MIPS. And we heard from customers that anywhere between 10 and 20% of the CPU utilization used by DB2 was allocated just to replication. And everybody said that's a big overhead to pay. We may have a huge amount of DB2 for ZOS transaction processing system, and then I'm going to add another 20% on top of that just to get the data off platform. So IBM said, we're going to try to solve that problem for you. We're going to take the capture component, for the most part, off platform. We're going to move it off of Z natively. We're still going to have to read the DB2 for ZOS log, but that's all we're going to do on System Z. All of the other stuff that we're doing to format the transaction and send it down the queue or the pipe or wherever else it's going, we're going to do that someplace else. So that's the data replication for DB2 ZOS remote source. So it has all the benefits that the current replication has available for it for change data capture for CDC. But now I can send the data someplace else, and I'm not adding a lot of overhead to my mainframe. So the really good news here is you can reduce your ZOS MIPS needed to replicate DB2 for ZOS data by up to 50%. And I closed that in a little box. When IBM first came out with this, they were hoping to reduce it by 90%, and they were a little optimistic, a little ambitious, but 50% based on customers who've been deploying this for the last year and a half, 2 years, and they're finding that is very successful and a great advantage to customers. So this also reduces dependency on specialized System Z skills for deploying, configuring, and monitoring, because you can use the management console or user interface or scripting in order to do that. So here's what it looks like. There is going to be a process up here at the top. There is a stored procedure on ZOS, which is executed, which actually does the log read. That stored procedure is invoked from this middle tier platform, LUW, Linux, Unix, and Windows. And yes, it's supported on Windows. No, I can't think of any reason why to deploy it on Windows, but it is. I guess they just didn't want to lose the W. But this is where the remote capture process runs. It's invoking this stored procedure. It's getting the raw log data, and it's moving it over to LUW. And then everything else that happens after that is happening the way that it always has within change data capture. I run down a TCP/IP pipe, and my apply process writes the data wherever I want it to go. So Scott, I'd just like to pause there. Well, yes, I'd like to pause here and find out, because there were so many people using DB2 for ZOS as a database source, whether anybody has any specific questions about remote capture.
Well, Mir asks, is there any solution to replicate data from DB2 VSE 7.5 to DB2 11.5 on Red Hat 7.5?
The answer,
LUW.
Well, the VSE 7.5, that was the legacy SQLDS product, and the answer is yes. Q replication was never tooled for DB2 server for VSE and VM, but SQL replication will. So you can read those logs, and since SQLDS has been at 7.5 for a decade and a half, maybe more, 10 years at least, all that should still work. I don't know if it's still supported under current versions, but certainly under prior versions. So the answer is a resounding yes, but you'll use the SQL replication component and the staging tables in order to do that.
Excellent. And the question queue is now clear. You can proceed.
Okay, cool. We'll keep rolling. Now, Hadoop, HDFS, and Kafka. Now, they said now we're talking about a target. A lot of customers 2 years ago, 5 years ago said, we're going to take all our data and put it in the data lake on HDFS, Hadoop distributed file system. We're going to run Hadoop, and we're going to answer all our questions and solve all our problems. The challenge with that is Hadoop is a great way to scan vast amount of information. Google does it. It's the map reduce technology that Google invented and been obviously productized. It's open source, but it's available via a couple of different vendors, Cloudera and Hortonworks, who have merged together. The problem is that HDFS is not great as an ingestion engine. It was not optimized to do that. It was optimized to scan large amounts of data that already existed. But a lot of customers just said they want to copy their, let's say, DB2 for ZOS production data into HDFS. We're finding that HDFS couldn't keep up. So there are two ways to handle this. One is to be able to create what we call mini batches. We write them to some intermediate from the DB2 for ZOS capture to some sort of file system, and then ingest them into Hadoop in more of a batch fashion. And those mini batches could run every minute, every 5 minutes. And if you're familiar with IBM's IDAA, that's pretty much how they did it on the IBM DB2 Analytics Accelerator. They used change data capture, and they wrote mini batches which were consumed by Netezza, because Netezza had the same problem. Another way, which has gotten a lot of uptake, and for anecdotally in the marketplace, we're seeing a huge number of customers who are interested in Kafka. Kafka is an open source message queuing system, and so you basically write this data to a Kafka topic, and then Kafka serves as the intermediary for the mini batches that ingest the data into HDFS or anything else that you may be interested in. So we actually have a customer today that is exploring using Kafka topics as sort of operational data store or a hub, they're writing the data from a mainframe application to this ODS using Kafka as the intermediary. And then anybody who needs any data for any reason, for analytics in any part of their enterprise, and this is a Fortune 500 company, they go out to the Kafka topic and they go and get it. So it creates a lot of flexibility and a lot of scaling that wasn't available before. So I don't want to, again, go ahead. I'm sorry, Scott.
Quick question. Is remote capture work based on DSN, CCMD, DSN, CCMO, IFI procedures?
I got to tell you, I don't know. I'll have to take that offline and get back to you. But I don't know that acronym offhand, so I'm not gonna hazard a guess.
Okay.
So again, looking at the Kafka, there are two write methods: the REST API and the native Java API. So if you're interested in Kafka, we could get you more information. But just knowing that this tool exists and the flexibility and the scaling that it provides is very useful. I'm very concerned about time because I've been rambling on, and we close at the top of the hour. Is that right, Scott?
That is correct. Our target is to end near the top of the hour. Sometimes we run a few minutes over.
Okay, so I'm going to keep rolling. But again, this is more about Kafka. So the next component that I wanted to call out here is the Postgres capture engine. So this is a data source that can now be captured by IBM's Change Data Capture and pull that data into someplace else. We're seeing a huge amount of uptake for Postgres, not least of which by IBM, which came out with their IBM Performance Server, which is a Postgres appliance to take the place of Netezza. So it is certainly the #1 growth database in today's market, and we've seen that in the marketplace. And this will allow you to take Postgres data and share it any place else that you need it in any other format. So it is available in version 11.4, and I called out the wrong version number before. I said something about 11.7. 11.4 is the most current version for the replication products. I mentioned the replication for continuous availability before, the ability to do like-to-like or like-to-unlike copying. IBM's integrated analytics system, the DB2 warehouse. This also includes some of the cloud instantations of these, DB2 warehouse on cloud, but the idea is that you want for continuous availability to have an exact copy of everything that's in one data repository and another. Greatly simplifies the process and is easier to install and manage. It uses queue replication under the covers, but it hides a lot of that complexity from you. Now, some upcoming enhancements. The remote capture for vSAM. So in solving the same problem for DB2 for ZOS for remote capture, it's now doing the same thing for their classic replication of vSAM. This product is available this month. I think June 26th is when it's going to be announced and generally available. This provides the same benefit of MIPS offload. It requires vSAM logging. It's log-based capture, so it doesn't work real well with vSAM batch, but it works great with CICS. And it is available right now for beta testing if you are interested, if IBM is still running the beta. The other upcoming enhancement to IBM's story is something called integrated synchronization. And this is the ability to move data using IBM technologies primarily from DB2Z to DB2 for LUW. That's the first use case. This technology may be expanded over time, but this was just premiered by IBM fellow Namik Curley. And he I think, did a presentation on this a month ago. It's available on that link. I believe it was recorded, so you can find out about it. It's known by the name Datagate, which sounds like a scandal that occurred during the Nixon administration, but Datagate it is. So if you're interested in that, the use case here is I want to use cheap commodity DB2 for LUW edge servers. I want to replicate my DB2 DB2 for ZOS data to it. I have an application which is primarily read access, and then when somebody goes to commit a transaction, then I send it back to DB2 for ZOS. An example would be airline reservations, where people may kick the tires on a lot of different itineraries and airports and dates, and you can do all of that on the edge servers, and then when you're ready to buy a seat, when we start flying again, you can do that in DB2 for ZOS. So tooling, I'm just going to take a second on this. For those of you who are not aware, both the Replication Center, which was part of the Java tooling that IBM introduced with Control Center a decade and a half ago, and the Q Replication Dashboard are both being sunset. QRep Dashboard has been deprecated. IBM is going to build all the tooling you need into the Watson Knowledge Catalog, the Watson Studio, for the monitoring and the administering and the configuration of standard replication, and then for continuous availability, the Enterprise DB2 Unified Console will be your source of tooling. I don't have a lot more on this. This is a statement of direction. I don't have screenshots or anything, but just to let you know what's coming. And what we're going to do now is we're going to take poll number 5 based on all the things that we've talked about, and then I'm going to turn the presentation over to my colleague Kim May, who's going to talk a little bit more about licensing.
I am now asking polling question 5. Which of the IBM replication solutions presented sounds most interesting based on your organization's needs? And there is another question in the queue. I'm going to hold it until the very end of your presentation. The handout is available for those that would like to download it from GoToWebinar handouts. Okay, closing the poll, sharing the responses. Replicate data from IBM Z Systems got 61%, continuous availability 45%, other 21%, Kafka 9%, Postgres 3%.
Interesting. Okay, different distribution than I've heard before, but that's good. We're reaching new audiences. So the decision criteria that you would use to choose one of these solutions, if you don't have one in place already, is obviously cost. That's number one today and become even more important in this economy. The software licensing, the maintenance, and the implementation cost, and then the business as usual processing cycle. So for example, if I want to replicate from DB2Z, I may consider remote capture because remote capture makes it cheaper to do on a Linux or Unix platform as opposed to general purpose processor MIPS. The data volume that you need to move, your tolerance for data loss. And some people would say, well, we don't want to lose any data. Well, that's true. I'm a DBA. I don't want to lose data either. But the bottom line is, depending on your use case, if this is Internet of Things and some monitor someplace of which you have maybe hundreds of thousands or millions doesn't report in 1 5-minute increment, that's probably okay. So the latency, how long can you afford after the transaction is committed to be representing it in the next repository? The skills that are needed, the simplicity versus complexity. So being able to deploy continuous availability and not have to worry about all the bells and whistles underneath that. And then finally, risk. What can you afford to lose in terms of data, downtime, and so forth? So how to buy, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Kim May, and let her.
Okay. So basically what I tried to do, because this is the most exciting part of the presentation, we definitely wanted to hold it to the end to make sure we had everyone's attention. Anyone who's ever been through the exercise of purchasing IBM software knows what a pleasure it can be, and that it's so simple that you just look it up online and you get the price and you go out and you buy it. I am definitely kidding, because it can be extremely difficult. And particularly with something like replication, where you have not only the sources, but also the targets, and the license models can vary. And the metrics on which the licensing is based also vary. So this is sort of my how to buy very oversimplified set of instructions. So you can see here, identify your sources and your targets, and then let's figure out how to get your best deal. Thank you. There are different metrics that IBM uses to measure, and they use these for software licensing, and they can make new ones up. And I'm actually scheduled to attend a webinar this afternoon about the latest revision to these. So I'm going to explain all this stuff and probably put most of you to sleep, and then it could change next week.
So it's going to be current for at least the next couple of hours.
It's going to be current at least today. At any rate, there are different, and some of you may be aware of these because some of these are used specifically for distributed software, and some of these are used specifically for Z software. So, and this new one, the resource value units, is sort of a hybrid. It's used only for mainframe software, and since so many people are interested in remote capture, that this is how remote capture is licensed. And if you ask me to define an RVU is actually the result of a calculation that's based on MIPS. So it's just and there's a calculator that can only be run by IBM. So this is the kind of thing that gets very, very difficult. I understand there are ways that people in the real world can actually figure this out, but I wouldn't try it. If you're interested in remote capture, my recommendation to you is to figure out exactly what you want to be doing, and then get an IBM or your IBM business partner involved so that you can determine what the RVUs are. The other thing that is an overriding thing for all of this, particularly for those of you that work for large IBM customers, if your organization has an IBM Enterprise License Agreement, an ELA in place with IBM, anything I tell you can go right out the window because there may be some sort of special deal that your organization cut with IBM. So if you're looking to purchase one of these or get a ballpark on the pricing, most important thing to do, I would say first, is get to your procurement team, find out if you have one of these enterprise license agreements in place, and find out if the product that you want to buy is included in that agreement, because then you're going to have the pricing spelled out for you. And if you need to understand and drill down, oh my gosh, well, how many PVUs do I have? That's something you're welcome to contact us, contact your IBM rep, contact your IBM business partner. We can get you answers for those. I think that is basically it. The one other thing that I wanted to make sure that I explained to everyone here, I think you may have explained it already, there is IBM Infosphere Data Replication, IIDR.
I tripped over this, so I'm glad you came back to it.
And then there is IBM Data Replication. So IIDR, IBM Infosphere Data Replication, requires you to license, is basically CDC or Q replication. Either deployment is included in the same part number. This part number requires you to license all sources and all targets. So you add up all the sources and all the targets which are going to be used in replication. And if you end up with, you pay to license each one. IDR, which is IBM Data Replication, is a new part number which IBM came up with specifically to limit cost. So if you have the option and you know exactly what you wear, you're from in your twos, and you can limit that, you may do better with IIDR. But if you're in an organization where people are saying, for instance, we want to replicate data from System Z because that's the gold copy data that we want, and we want to be able to put that in 37 edge systems this week and maybe 47 next week, and you don't want to have to worry about relicensing each time a new system is stood up, then you want to use IDR, because with IDR, you pay a little bit more, but you only license the source. You get unlimited targets for free. So IDR is shorter. IDR, if you have a lot, is cheaper. IIDR is more expensive, but can be more expensive, but you just have to play with the numbers. Or the per PVU cost is about twice as much for IIDR as it is for IDR. Or I have that backwards. So I have that backwards, don't I? Yes. Okay. Okay. But it's about $400 versus $200 per PVU. But you really have to sit down and map out what it is you want to do, and then use the old spreadsheet and figure out what your best deal is.
Thank you very much. I know you didn't have a lot of time and it was at the end of the presentation, but I know that that helps our audience understand, because the first thing their manager says when they come back to them and says, we need to do this, they say, how much is it going to cost? So you've at least given them a hunting license.
Well done, Kim. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Scott.
So just a couple of closing slides. There are lots of help that we can give you in terms of training, health checks, version-to-version upgrades, and the contact information is there. For the audience, if you want to know what's coming, I gave you a taste of that. IBM now publishes their roadmaps for product development. So for CDC, QRep, and IMS vSAM Classic replication, these are all listed on these links that you have access in the presentation that Scott posted. So you can actually see what features are going to be added and what's coming next. And you can actually influence that with IBM by making an idea, which used to be called a request for enhancement. The idea is you can say, we need this new feature, and you're going to help us get it. So here is what used to be called an RFE and now is an idea, the first link. The second link is the data replication community. If you're not aware of this, DeveloperWorks has been sunset. Most of the content that was there, most of the current content has been moved to the data replication community. So you can find a lot of wikis, some code snippets and things like that under the links that you see on the screen. And with that, we are done.
Well, thank you, Frank. Thank you very much. Let's see, I need to make me the presenter. There we go, show my screen. There's Frank. And I do have a question from the audience I'll throw over your way. To replicate data, it has a cost, also in terms of resources. And some recovery plan need to be well thought out in case something gets wrong. And if more platform are involved, this is not always easy. Even if to have data capture agent outside the mainframe may reduce costs, it complicates the architecture, so more possible point of failure. That is my point of view. What is your opinion on data virtualization? We got to the question. What is your opinion on data virtualization?
Well, I want to respond to the preamble that I agree with you entirely. Yes, by splitting up the capture onto a remote platform, you increase risk, but you may reduce cost. And those two have an inverse relationship most of the time. In terms of data virtualization, it's interesting. I have a customer right now today. I'm going to be on a meeting in less than an hour to talk about the Data Virtualization Manager, DVM product. And IBM has come out with federation products, again, beginning 30 years ago with Data Joiner. And my challenge with virtualization, at least from the IBM products that I've worked with, is that they're good for spot problems, but they don't operate at scale. That for a variety of reasons, it's very hard to get. I wouldn't want a transaction processing system to go through a virtualization layer to go get data with high SLAs, very low response time. That in my humble opinion.
Well, Frank, 100% of our audience learned something from you today. That's fantastic. And now I'm going to ask that.
I got to ask you, brother, how many 100% do you get? Not that I'm competitive or anything. Yeah.
The real question is,
how many people are still awake? Go ahead.
How many people learned something of value?
Right.
Thank you, Art.
No, they learned.
So, Scott, we're going to turn it over to you. I know you have some wrap up to do. Thank you very much again for inviting us to join the DataView show today. We really enjoyed it, and I hope I hope we get to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. It's been a great deal of fun. I'm now asking people where they've joined us from today. Home office, work office, Starbucks or other free Wi-Fi, or driving in my car. And home office is definitely dominating with 96% so far. So we're all staying at home, staying it safe, working from home, closing the poll, sharing those results. And then I'm going to wrap up quick. Okay, so there you go, 96% home office. Hide that. And Frank, thanks for being our guest today. Audience, thanks for being here. Without you, we wouldn't have an audience and it wouldn't be as much fun. Thank you, sponsors. The show is sponsored by the IBM community. Replays and show news, dataviewshow.com/news. We'll have the replay blog up later this afternoon, and you'll have another chance to get Frank's PDF with that. And with all that, that takes us to the end of the show. Thank you all for being here, and continue to stay safe. And maybe take up yoga. Email Frank and ask him who his yoga instructor is, because doing yoga over Zoom sounds very interesting to me. Bye, y'all.
Take care, Scott. Bye.